Hi folks, welcome to our three-part documentary series on Romancing Grand Junction, Tennessee. In this three-part series, we're celebrating the history, the lore, and the legend of bird dogs and field trials. The three parts include a visit to the National Bird Dog Museum and Hall of Fame, and secondly to historic Ames Plantation, and we're going to get a tour of Ames. And the third part is going to explore and celebrate the men and the women of bird dogs in field trials. We're going to interview several pros, and we're going to go to the national field trial, the national championship, and we're going to follow some dogs. All very exciting. This episode celebrates the National Bird Dog Museum and Hall of Fame, and we're going to have with us our host, Captain Gary Lockee. Folks, if you come to Grand Junction, you have to come to the Bird Dog Museum. We're here today with Gary Lockee. Gary was very instrumental in opening this museum. Gary, tell me a little bit about the history.
Okay. I am a history buff myself. At one stage of the game, I taught naval history, but I'm also interested in our country. And I've traveled all over the United States, and nearly every town, every county in our country has a museum. And after attending or running my dog in the national champion here several times, and seeing all the wonderful dogs, all the work that they do, I says, why in the world hasn't somebody established a facility to honor bird dogs? And with that in mind, we got a few people together and says, hey, what do we have to do to get a bird dog museum started? And they said, well, first of all, you have the desire to say highlight dogs in a situation where you capture photographs, information, history, or what have you about dogs, and you display it. And that's sort of what a museum is all about. So lo and behold, we were able to purchase some land, and that's a go point. Now, we don't want to get in the history of a long time before this, of which somebody thought about doing a bird dog museum, but it didn't do it. When we started, we said, hey, we're going to make this thing happen. So we purchased the land. We laid out a little plan. We started getting some concrete, poured us a foundation, and up starts the building. And then all over the country, people started to saying, what do you mean? Are those guys serious? We've never heard of them before. And they're going to build a bird dog museum. And once you say, come up with something positive like the concrete, start a building, oh, those guys are serious. Maybe I ought to start chipping in a little money. So we were able to raise enough money that when this building was dedicated in February 1991, every bill had been paid. So that's a thumbnail sketch of getting started, but we did have a lot of help, a lot of people that was like dogs, just like I did, jumped on board and says, hey, we're with you.
Wonderful. That's great. Gary, will you take us on a little tour?
I'd be glad to take you on a little tour, but now I really should advise you before we start a tour that I have a 2.5-hour tour, which I don't believe you have that much time, but I think we can condense it down to the time suitable for you, say maybe 30 minutes or so. Will that be satisfactory?
That'll be perfect. Thank you.
We would like to welcome you to the National Bird Dog Museum. And as probably every person knows, a museum is a place where you collect history, art, educational type items, and this is one of the things that we've done. But the unusual part or the neat part about a bird dog museum is our main object here, our main subject is the bird dog. We have recognized something like 40 breeds of bird dogs, and they come basically in 3 categories, or 3 groups I like to call it. You have the pointing group, which is several dogs in that group. You have the retrieving group, which is several dogs in that group. And then you have the flushing group, which of course there's several dogs in that group. Now the area that we're standing in right now is sort of an entrance to our museum. We have a tremendous number of school children come here, and of course they want to know, what is a bird dog? So we're in a position here to say, show them portraits, pictures, photographs, anything you want to call it, related to bird dogs. And we've tried to say, cover all of these breeds. And this is a good place to say, if you're a visitor, you want to start right here. In this area of the museum, we have probably the pride and the joy of bird dogdom. We were lucky to obtain a live taxidermy. It's the dog as if he were alive, of Count Noble, one of the most famous bird dogs in the history of bird dogdom. Count Noble was imported into this country in something like 1879, and then he's been elected to the Field Trial Hall of Fame because of so many things that he did that was great. If we had the pedigree of all the setters that won the national championship, or that the bird hunters used in this country up till about 1930, you would find this dog in the pedigree. In other words, the first setters to win, the first dogs to win the national championship were primarily setters for the first 15 or so years. And all of those setters you will find Count Noble in the pedigree. Now the other thing about Count Noble that we like, we were able to obtain him from the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh because his owner lived in Pittsburgh, and of course he died in Pittsburgh. There's all kinds of stories been told about Count Noble. We do know that he actually campaigned in field trials in the Grand Junction area, so we like to say we have acquired the greatest of greats in Count Noble. A tour of the National Bird Dog Museum would show you we have a tremendous number of one-of-a-kind, spectacular art pieces, one of which was done by somebody that we didn't know at the time, but we had a 8 or 9-year-old child come into the museum one day and says, "Mr. Lockee, you got the strangest picture of a dog that we have ever seen." And I said, "Son, how about showing me this strange dog, because I think I know about everything here." And he says, "Look at this dog. I can stand over here to the right, and that dog's looking me right straight in the eye. I can move in front of him, and he's looking me right straight in the eye." And he says, "I move over to the left, and he's looking me straight in the eye." So I says, immediately, we have the Mona Lisa of the bird dog world right here in Grand Junction, right here in the National Bird Dog Museum. And we have just a tremendous number of things like this that I think verifies the fact that we just cannot show them all to you in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, but we're really grateful to have some people that are bird dog lovers come in and spend all day long looking at the dogs they've heard about, read about, and have done fantastic jobs in the hunting and the field trial world. We have a lot of visitors come in here and wonder why in the world you'd have a neat portrait of a pointer on the wall with 3 or 4 holes in the portrait. This happens to be a dog that was in Judge Lee West's office, who was a federal judge in Oklahoma City back in the days of the McVeigh boy that exploded the big bomb in the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. This picture was hanging behind Judge Lee's desk. Had he been at the desk that particular day, he would be deceased. This would have killed him. So Judge West, in deference to having this magnificent bar-shoe dog displayed in our museum, donated that to the National Bird Dog Museum. Long before field trialing, America had a tremendous number of people that loved to hunt. A lot of those people loved to bird hunt. And in the South, the principal bird was the bobwhite quail. What we have here is some examples of typical bird hunting guns. Now we have L.C. Smiths, we have Lefevres, we have some Ithacas, we have some Remingtons, and Winchester. Most of the popular bird hunters used one of these particular guns back in those old days. And we've been lucky now to have somebody donate some additional space that we can display additional guns. But now we're lucky to have a tremendous number of typical bird hunting guns here, and we of course frequently worried about their security. So, but we love to have our bird hunting guns because dogs, bird hunting, guns, all are almost synonymous. Field trials have been an integral part of Grand Junction, and of course we've made it an integral part of our National Bird Dog Museum. Here you will see several portraits of the dogs that have won the national championship. Now we like to say that the Bird Dog Museum, when we first opened up in 1991, had one oil painting in the whole facility. Now we have practically all of the dogs covered here. Some of the old timers, of course, are black and white, but for the last 25 years, I believe we have a colored oil or watercolored replica of the dogs that have won the national championship out here at the Ames Plantation. And that championship is 117 years old as we speak. So far on our tour, we've concentrated our efforts in what we call the National Bird Dog Museum. But you've got to keep in mind that we have a tremendous amount of things here relating to bird dogs that not necessarily belong to the National Bird Dog Museum, but we have something that's called a Bird Dog Foundation. That's our 501c3 organization, of course, which makes your donations to the foundation tax-free. But we're moved into a building called the Field Trial Hall of Fame. Now, the Field Trial Hall of Fame was first organized and the first dogs elected in 1954 by Mr. Bill Brown. Since that time, we have been able to get our retriever friends on board. So we have a Field Trial Hall of Fame for retrievers. We have a Field Trial Hall of Fame that recognizes the red setters, the Springer Spaniels, the Brittany's, the German short hairs, we've even got the Cocker Spaniels here now. What is represented in the Field Trial Hall of Fame are the dogs and the people that have made significant contributions to the field trial sport. Now, field trials, to me, and I've been quizzed on this frequently in my lifetime, says, why in the world are you interested in field trials when hunting is so much fun? Well, if you get a class dog that's a little above or a little cut above the hunting level, we can put him in a field trial category. And those dogs that have excelled in field trials, we have, I believe, 99% of all those dogs covered here in some type of photography. And in the case of the people, we call the people distinguished field trialers or distinguished persons, and the dogs we call outstanding dogs. So this is just a thumbnail sketch of what the Field Trial Hall of Fame does, and it's part of the Bird Dog Foundation umbrella on which just hovers over our National Bird Dog Museum and our Field Trial Hall of Fame.
Folks, we're going to take a very short break from our tour, and we're going to visit with Bernie Mathis from the American Field magazine, and Bernie has a few comments on the Hall of Fame. But we'll be right back after Bernie with more tour with Captain Gary Lockee. Folks, we're real honored to have with us Bernie Mathis from the American Field. And Bernie, welcome. You know, you folks at the American Field have kind of shepherded this Field Trial Hall of Fame, and which is a wonderful thing. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, the Field Trial Hall of Fame was originated in 1963. The concept was put out to the Field Trial public around 1963, and then the first elections were held in 1964. And initially, they went back and picked up, I shouldn't say picked up, but honored the original and the old timers and the great old champions and great patrons of the sport in those first couple of years. And then as they were honored, more recent honorees from the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s until we reach today. So we've got quite a roster of wonderful individuals. And what's interesting about the Field Trial Hall of Fame is that unlike other sporting halls of fame, the criterion for the Hall of Fame is really contributions to the sport by the persons and by the dogs. So it's unique in that respect.
Wonderful. Bernie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
You are now in the Retriever Field Trial Hall of Fame. Now, to my back and on each side, we have replicas of distinguished people that have been elected to the Retriever Field Trial Hall of Fame. And these people have spent millions and millions of dollars, have campaigned and trained millions and millions of dogs, and we have over 100 people that have been elected to the Retriever Field Trial Hall of Fame. And in just a minute, I will get you a couple of pictures of some dogs. Now here we have some of the outstanding dogs that represents the Retriever breeds. But now we will find that more Labradors are represented in the Field Trial Hall of Fame than any of the other Retriever breeds. However, the Golden Retrievers are also represented here, but we have Retriever people, Retriever dogs, and they are represented in this particular building. Now the Brittany's belong to the pointing breed, but now the people that sponsor Brittany's and love Brittany's, that hunt Brittany's and field trial Brittany's, they decided they needed a little more recognition than our early efforts provided. So we have a building here that covers several of the breeds other than the pointers and setters, other than the retrievers, that covers what we used to refer to as the continental breeds. But we have in this particular building the people and the dogs that are elected to the Brittany Field Trial Hall represented here. Also in this building, which we'll look at in a minute, we have the German Shorthairs represented, we have the English Springer Spaniels represented, the Cockers represented, the Visualists also represented, and the dogs and the people you will find in this building. No tour of a museum, especially a dog museum, would be complete without a little human interest story. But now, if we had time and if we had the inclination, this Bird Dog Foundation and all the things under that umbrella would almost any stop would have a human interest story. But now here's a human interest story that we happen to have a very, I would say, affluent lady that we visited her husband when he was almost on his deathbed. And she asked him, where in the world, and this is a retriever person, where in the world is that portrait of a dog called Bracken Sweet? And he says, well, it's somewhere here in the house. So she says, well, where do you think it might be? He says, well, somewhere downstairs. So she goes downstairs on her own and finds Bracken Sweet, which had won the national championship something 25 or 30 years earlier, still in the cardboard, in the big wooden box that it came from the artist in. He hadn't even opened the box to see what he had. So she just took this portrait and took it out and put it in my car. And he says, what in the world are you doing with that portrait? she says, I'm giving it to Gary Lockee, who's going to put it in the National Retriever Museum, and if you don't like it, it's sort of tough. Just that's how bold this redheaded gal was. So after a little bit, and we almost got ready to go, now we have got her husband's a professional trainer, and this gentleman's a professional trainer, one of the old timers, Cotton Purcell and Bill Wunderlich. And she looked at this picture here of these three dogs, and she says to me, without the landlord knowing who she was talking to or what she was talking about, and she says to me, Gary, wouldn't you like to have that picture right there in the museum? And I said, it would be great. So she says, Cotton, we want this picture right here for the museum. And he says back to her, says, well, I can't give away everything I got in my house, but what do you offer me for it? So she says, would you take a couple of $100,000 for it? Or maybe it's a couple of $1,000, so not to get my story too exaggerated. And he said yes. And we took it out to my car. I had at that time an Explorer. And this thing, it doesn't look that way, but there's no way I could get that into the vehicle. So I told Mr. Cotton, I'm going to send a UPS man here and have him package it and send it to me at the museum. But now, he had to explain what he had here. You'll notice that we've got a Chesapeake and two blacks. And he went on to explain this Chesapeake belonging to one of his prime customers early on. And she had to talk him into taking the dog because he was so mean. He tried to tell her, I don't want that dog in my kennel because he'll tear me up. So she finally, since I'm such a big customer of yours, I want you to take this dog and I want you to put a little training on him. So he says, well, okay. So he got him one of those galvanized lids off of a garbage can and made him a shield that fit his arm. And when he'd take this old dog, I'll call his name in a minute maybe, when I take him out, I'm going to have that shield in front of me so that dog doesn't tear me up. But, you know, we tried to get that shield from Mr. Rex Carr, but he said, you know, some of my help threw that thing away. I wish I had it for your museum, but I said, I don't have it. But that is one of what I call one of our human interest stories. No museum that I'm aware of doesn't have, say, some type of educational capability. The donors or the docents at the museum might not even know what's in the museum that would come under the head of education. But when we founded the Bird Dog Foundation, we said one of the key items, I think, in getting a 501c3 was to tell the good old IRS that we're going to have an education program. Well, as soon as we designed this building, this whole building that we're in now, we happen to be in the library right now, but in the rest of the building is oriented or slanted towards education. So the first thing we did when we got our 501c3, we set aside a space we call a library. Now, we haven't bought, to my knowledge, a single book and maybe one magazine subscription, but we have almost 2,000 volumes in here of various books related to bird dogs, related to hunting, related to game management, related to the environment, and so forth. But most of it located in this building is dedicated to education. And one of the two things that I'd like to just tell you that I can't show you is that our two key programs is one is a scholarship program that we give 2 scholarships each year to 2 high school graduating seniors that intend to go to college. Now, we are very proud of that program. Our second program, and we haven't talked about it too much, is an art program because that's one of the key capabilities of a museum is to display, collect, and what have you, art. Now, we have a children's art program for children from the K grades all the way through the 12th grade. And each year we get probably 200 or 300, in fact, we've got more than that one year, of art that the children construct or perform or create. And one of the neatest ones we ever saw when they said, we're doing this for the Bird Dog Museum. So they painted a tree as their background, and they painted the bird dog up in the tree and painted the bird at the root of the tree, which is really a key prize for everybody to look at. But those are our key, truly education programs, scholarship program and an art program, and in the summertime we even have a reading program for children. So we're very proud of our education capability. This is a room that we call the Taxidermy Room, and we couldn't think of a better name, but in here we've tried to display as many of the game birds that inhabit North America as we possibly can. In other words, we've got 6 species of quail that we know about. We've got doves, we've got pigeons, we've got woodcock, we've got ptarmigan. And this thing that I have here in my hand is one of the very unusual things, because this is called a Tennessee red quail. Now, it was first discovered on the Ames plantation, and I'm not sure that I ever could come up with what the true meaning is, but we've had several people tell us that this was discovered on the Ames plantation. It's a very unusual discovery, and a lot of people can tell you how it became a red quail, and there's some of them in existence around here today. In fact, we found some out on the West Coast the other day. But Mr. Jones is the guy that discovered this on the Ames plantation. And I guess the one thing that I felt like was very authentic, we used to have a lady here called Mrs. Jameson that raised quail. She raised bob whites, she raised red quail, and she raised pheasants. And I says, how do you make sure that you can continue to raise red quail in captivity? And she says, well, you know, it's not too difficult, but if you take these red quail out and separate them from all the others, they will retrograde or back up or come back to bob whites. So this is what she told me, and she had done enough breeding of quail that I didn't deny a thing she said. I didn't say anything contrary, but as the camera pans here, you'll notice that we've tried to say, capture all of these birds, upland game, and also you'll find that we have a tremendous number of waterfowl species as well as the predators of our game birds. We've got things here that's unbelievable, like the bobcats, we got coyotes, we got foxes, we got coons, we've got even wolverines, but I don't know what they do, but somebody donated them, and this place is a neat place to bring children.
Gary, that was an amazing tour, and I want to thank you so much for your time. Again, I want to remind the folks that they've got to come. You know, the museum itself is a destination, not just the Ames and the plantation, but the museum itself is a destination. We're going to put the website up here for the folks. They can see the hours, when to come. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you very much, and I have one little more thing to say. We have been told by executives, big-time people, that this museum is the best kept secret in West Tennessee.
I believe it.
Bird Dogs Afield, presented by Native Performance Dog Food, and brought to you in part by RST Shot Shells, Mud River Dog Products, Pete Shoe Dryer, Wooden Stream Outdoor Footwear, and Canine Active.